So I'll walk through this exercise here from the week 13 forum. So we're checking on the reliability of bank records, and let's see. They check it on the accuracy of the accounts. So suppose an auditing firm is interested in the estimated proportion of accounts whose balances disagree with a customer. So they have 200 savings accounts. Here, let me highlight this. 200 savings accounts is N, and 15 said they disagree. And the bank claims that the true fraction of accounts is at the most 5%. So we're going to say, so the bank, if the bank's correct, the null hypothesis is, well, let's see, that the proportion of accounts is equal to 5% or 0.05 or less, but as long as the cap is 5%, we're okay. And then what you're trying to prove as an auditor is that actually a higher percentage of customers disagree. So that's the two hypotheses, and now we're going to find out if where we're at here with a sample. So I know p hat sample proportion is 15 out of 200. That works out to be 0.075 or 7.5%. So now the next step in this is to come up with a test statistic. So I'll do that in the next page. So to get the test statistic, we're going to need a standard deviation. And what we're trying to say here is that the bank is correct, that only 5%, or at most 5%, of the customers disagree. So the center of this sampling distribution of all those samples is the 5% number. And to get the standard deviation, well, that's what we're going to use, because we always talk about it as if HO was true. So I'm going to do that standard deviation formula where I take P times 1 minus P divided by the sample size, and then take the square root of this. And let's see, there was 200 people in the sample. So let's see, what's that? That's going to be 5% times 0.95 over 200. So if I did the arithmetic right, I'm getting 0.0154 for the standard deviation. So I'm all set now to calculate the test statistic for this situation. So we're going to do a z-score. P hat was 0.075. The stated average is 0.05. And the standard deviation we just calculated is 0.0154. I'm going to let the calculator carry all these decimal places, but it's good not to round too early when you're working with proportions. So I'm going to calculate that z-score. So doing this arithmetic, I came up with a z-score of 1.6. I'm going to go with the 1.6 because table A only goes to one decimal place. Okay, so what we've done here is just so we know where we're headed for, because the next step is to find the p-value. We're trying to say, from looking at our HO and HA, we're trying to say that the proportion of people with bank disagreements with the bank account is higher than 0.05. So for our test result here, that 0.075, remember, if the z-score is 0 in the middle, we're checking for the z-score of 1.6, and we want to find the percent to the right of it. And I know that because my HA was a greater than, right? Remember how it was greater than 0.05? So I know I'm going to be shading to the right. I'm looking for that tail area. So I'm going to have to go look at table B, go get that percentile, and take that away from 100. So I'm looking up the percentile for a z-score of 1.6. So what I'm seeing right there is 94.52. So that is the area to the left. I need to find the area of the right to find that tail area. So 100 minus 94.52 is going to be, it's going to be 5.48%, and make that a decimal version or a proportion, I just divided by 100. So now I gotta make a decision. Alright, so we've got that for a p-value. They're telling us to test the bank's claim with a 10% significance level. The significance level is a benchmark we can use and say if our p-value is less than that number, we can decide to go with HA, reject HO. Okay, it's like an acceptable level of error. Because what the p-value is, it's the chance we're going to be wrong if we decide that we can reject HA and reject HO and go with HA. So since they gave us the blessing, and as long as our p-value is less than 10% or less than 0.1, we can go ahead and say that we don't think the bank is correct. We think that a higher proportion of the accounts are out of balance, and so we're good. This is almost another way to think about this is the 0.1 is a limbo bar, and does your p-value get under it because it's smaller than that? And so that's the decision I'm going to make. I'm going to say I'm going to reject HO. I'm going to accept HA, which means the bank has a higher percentage of customers that have disagreements in their account balances than what they're stating at 5%. Okay. So just as a check on all this, I decided I was going to do a confidence interval, and since they told me to use a 10% level of significance, what I did is since it's a 10% level of significance, if I'm trying to come up with a confidence interval, that becomes a two-tailed kind of situation where I have 10% up here, 10% up here, which is 80% in the middle. So I'm finding an 80% confidence interval, and that's why I use 1.3. If you go into table B, you'd see that a z-score negative 1.3 is about 10% less than that, and that's I'm rounding because of the limitations of that table, but that's where I came up with the 1.3. And if you notice, the confidence interval does not contain 5%, so that's why at that 10% level of significance, we weren't able to say that the bank was correct, that there's a higher proportion of customers have a disagreement. Okay, so I hope that kind of checks with maybe something you understand better than the confidence interval, the significance tests. But that's the whole process. Your first step is you want to set up your HO and HA, set up your two hypotheses. Then you probably want to find the standard deviation for the test, whether you're dealing with means or proportions. Now remember, if you're dealing with means, they're going to tell you X bar and S, or they'll tell you some standard deviation. In order to get the standard deviation with a sampling distribution, you have to do S divided by the square root of the sample size. Okay, if you got proportions, that's where you're going to take that P, that population proportion, times 1 minus P over the sample size. So that's for proportions, like the one I just did. Or if it's talking about sample means, then you got to deal with that formula. So you're going to ask yourself that. Then once you get that, then you'll want to calculate a z-score, because that's your test statistic. You're trying to find out how many standard deviations away from that supposed middle you are. So you want to find a z-score. Then you want to find a p-value. And then you want to make a decision. And it's a 4-step process, really. And it's always good to put your decision back into context. I mean, on that last exam, when I'm saying, tell me you're going to reject HO or not, you're going to have to say what that means in terms of bank records or whatever it's about. Okay?